Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wioya. Chapter 259. Clue. Part 1. Stab. Jiam Chung let out a pained groan as the needle pierced through the center of his toenail. He wanted to scream in agony, but he couldn't even do that because of the ball of cloth stuffed in his mouth. He had tried to steel himself, but he couldn't endure the relentless pain. He prided himself on having a strong willpower that could cross the threshold, but it took less than a quarter of an hour for it to crumble. What was that? Yank. Mok Jiangan pulled the ball of cloth out of his mouth. Jiam Chung barely managed to speak, exhaling rough breaths. Please, kill me. That's the 5th time now. It's still too early. Stuff. Mok Jiangan shoved the ball of cloth back into his mouth. Then he slowly pushed another needle next to his toenail. Stab. Jiam Chung writhed in pain, appealing for mercy. However, Mok Jiangan, without even a change in his expression, shook and tilted his toenail with the inserted needle. Unable to bear the suffering, Jiam Chung eventually lost consciousness. Slump. Just as his head was about to droop down, slap. Mok Jiangan slapped his forehead with his palm, forcing it back up. With this, Jiam Chung, who had been about to faint, regained his senses. Upon waking up, Jiam Chung's heart nearly stopped at the sight of Mok Jiangan's face through his hazy vision. For a fleeting moment, he wished he wouldn't wake up again, but that was a futile hope. This guy is truly a demon. He had never seen someone so vicious before. He himself had interrogated others many times, but he had never gone this far. This guy was torturing him to the brink of death, not giving him any chance to rest or reprieve. It was as if he was venting his anger. So he had no choice but to desperately wish for death. After all, with both arms severed and his body so ruined, he realized that death was the only rest. He mumbled in a feeble voice. Then, without a word, Mok Jiangan ripped off one of the toenails he had stabbed with needles. Rip. The human body was truly amazing. Even though the pain continued, one would think he would get used to it, but that wasn't the case at all. Each new pain only compounded the existing pain, multiplying the suffering. Mok Jiangan sweetly whispered into his ear. You want to die, don't you? Don't you want to close your eyes peacefully like this? It was indescribably strange. Never had the words about letting him die sounded so sweet. If only he could escape this pain right now, he felt like he could do anything. Clench. At that moment, Jiam Chung bit down on the ball of cloth filling his mouth. For a moment, he had weakened and almost succumbed to the guy's temptation. No matter how painful it was, he couldn't do anything for the one torturing him and driving him to death. Then, through his hazy vision, he saw Mok Jiangan's face. The corners of his mouth were stretched to his ears. Shudder. The moment he saw this, a chill ran down Jiam Chung's spine. Even as he was struggling to muster his resolve, Mok Jiangan wasn't showing disappointment but rather joy. Why the hell was he so happy? Why was he smiling with such a demonic face? As he was filled with questions. Shwip. Mok Jiangan placed his hand on his shoulder and gently whispered. I'm glad. I was worried you might weaken and give up. What? Please endure a little longer. I want to see you suffer and be in agony. The night is still very long, after all. The moment he heard those words, Jiam Chung felt like his heart would shatter from pain. It seemed that what this guy wanted wasn't simply to extract the desired information from him. He was enjoying his pain and suffering itself. Demon. This guy is a demon who crawled up from the depths of hell, the embodiment of evil. He couldn't think of it any other way. As fear engulfed his entire body and mind, the resolve he had built up crumbled in an instant. Even if he endured, who would acknowledge it? In the end, wouldn't everything end with his death? At that moment, he choked up. Why did he alone have to suffer like this? Even if he maintained his loyalty and righteousness here and died in agony until the very end, would they even know? In the end, even if he died, wouldn't they be the only ones enjoying the glory and benefits? As his thoughts reached this point, Jiam Chung's body went limp as if he had given up. It would be troublesome if you gave up already. Seeing Jiam Chung's limp and unresponsive state, Mok Jiangun clicked his tongue as if disappointed. He had hoped for him to endure a little longer, but it seemed meaningless now. So he removed the ball of cloth stuffed in his mouth. Yank! Ha, ha! As the ball of cloth was removed, Jiam Chung feebly opened his mouth, catching his breath. What, you just tell me. I won't do anymore. Grab. Ugh. At that moment, Mok Jiangun gripped his jaw. Then, with one hand, he fixed his head in place and pushed his jaw inward and upward. With that crack, along with the sound of bones creaking, Jiam Chung's dislocated jaw joint was realigned. Not only were all his teeth broken when his face was torn, but his jaw joint was also dislocated. That's why he couldn't pronounce properly. But now that his jaw joint was realigned, let's talk now. Just how much? Although his pronunciation was still slurred due to his missing teeth, it was at a level that could be understood better than before. However, he wasn't happy at all. In the end, whether this way or that, he had to tell the guy what he wanted to hear in order to meet his death comfortably. But before that, there was one question he wanted to resolve. Before answering, I want to ask one thing. It seems you're not ready yet. At that question, Mok Jiangun tried to shove the ball of cloth back into his mouth. Jiam Chung was startled and hurriedly spoke. I was just curious about how the Sichuandang family managed to uncover our existence. Sichuandang family? At his words, Mok Jiangun furrowed his brows. What was this about now? Why was this guy suddenly associating him with the Sichuandang family? As he was puzzled, Jiam Chung cautiously said, in the current martial world, the only ones who have reached the level of poison master are Guyong Sao, the 8 poison snake staff, and Dang Inhe, the head of the Sichuandang family, the 1,000 poison hands. So? Among them, Guyong Sao couldn't possibly be here, so naturally, the only one left is the 1,000 poison hands. Why do you assert that Guyong Sao wouldn't be here? That's... Seeing him hesitate, Mok Jiangun's eyes narrowed. Thanks to his attitude, he could easily figure out one thing. You seem to know Guyong Sao very well. Or perhaps he's on your side. Damn it. I did something stupid. At Mok Jiangun's words, Jiam Chung blamed his own foolishness. He didn't need to mention Guyong Sao of the 8 poison snake staff, but in trying to confirm that his guess was correct, he ended up revealing unnecessary information. Don't worry. I'm not particularly interested in this. Rather, there's something else I'd like you to tell me. Something else? The mark on your scabbard, what is it? At this question, Jiam Chung furrowed his brows. He thought the guy was asking because he knew something about the mark, but did he not know anything? But then Mok Jiangun pressed down hard on his shoulder and said, squeeze. Ugh. I'd like you to answer immediately when asked. Don't try to be clever. It's a mark symbolizing the organization. Organization? Yes. As I thought, it is a group. This aligned almost perfectly with his expectations. So Mok Jiangun asked another question. I understand it symbolizes an organization, but what does this mark actually mean? This won't do. It seems you're not ready yet. As he said that, Mok Jiangun tried to shove the ball of cloth back into his mouth. Jiam Chung was startled and hurriedly spoke. I don't know the exact meaning either. I only know that it adds 1 to 2. Adds 1 to 2? What did that mean? Mok Jiangun ruminated on those words. Since he said it adds 1 to 2, the part that was originally, with the lower part of the stroke being longer indeed meant 2. But what did it mean to add 1 vertically penetrating the line? Why not just add one horizontally? That way, it would become the character 3, and the meaning would make sense. But why did they say it had that meaning when the line penetrated vertically? Was there a hidden meaning? There's also the character 3, so do you really think that makes sense? I really don't know. I was just told that something that couldn't exist was added. Something that couldn't exist was added? Mok Jae-eun stroked his chin. It was too vague, so it was difficult to understand the meaning just from this. But it didn't matter. If he found out what they were doing, the answer would naturally come out. So Mok Jae-eun tried to ask what he was most curious about. This was the most urgent matter above all else. Is the one called Ghost Blade also on your side? At those words, Jae Chung's expression slightly distorted. It seems so. Who the hell is this guy? The reason Jae Chung reacted this way was that until now, no one had ever figured out that Ghost Blade was related to them. To the flustered Jae Chung, Mok Jae-eun said what he wanted to ask the most. When Ghost Blade kills someone or something, does he leave your organization's mark? When he kills someone or something? Yes. If this was confirmed, the culprit would undoubtedly be Ghost Blade. Mok Jae-eun stared intently at Jae Chung. However, to Mok Jae-eun's question, Jae Chung gave a completely unexpected answer. Do you think that makes sense? What? Why would he leave a mark if he deliberately killed someone? What do you mean by that? The dead can't speak. And a dead corpse is meant to rot and disappear. But our organization doesn't leave traces. So why would we leave a mark on someone we killed? At those words, one of Mok Jae-eun's eyebrows raised. That was because what this guy said wasn't wrong, even if he was lying. There was no reason for a secretive organization to leave traces as if boasting. So Mok Jae-eun asked. Then why did they leave such a mark on those they killed or someone? I think there's some misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? We don't leave our organization's mark on those we have already killed. And the one who leaves such a mark as a scar is? The one who leaves it is? Only the one you know as Ghost Blade. Pack. As soon as he finished speaking, Mok Jae-eun grabbed Jae Chung by the collar, pulled him close, and said in a menacing voice, "Are you messing with me right now? You're saying Ghost Blade left a mark on someone who was already dead, and you want me to believe that? It's not a lie. Ghost Blade leaving that mark is a kind of warning." Warning? What does that mean? I don't know exactly either. I just heard that Ghost Blade leaves such scars as a warning to those involved in our affairs. If they ignore the warning, he makes them pay with their lives and erases the scar. Bam. Ugh. Before he could even finish speaking, Mok Jae-eun pushed him to the floor. Startled, Jae Chung said, "It's true. I've already confirmed that he left the scar and then killed someone, yet you keep trying to deceive me." Left the scar and then killed? How could that be? How could that be? I saw it with my own eyes. That's impossible. Didn't I tell you? Why would Ghost Blade leave a trace that could be tracked or used as a clue in such a place? This is Aya. A scream of pain burst out from Jae Chung's mouth. Mok Jae-eun's fingers had dug into his collarbone. As he was suffering like this, Mok Jae-eun's eyes narrowed to the point of sharpness. He doesn't leave traces on the dead? Mok Jae-eun's mind became complicated. Based on the clues he had pursued so far, Ghost Blade should be the one who killed him. But Ghost Blade said he doesn't leave traces on the dead. Yet there was a scar-like mark left on his dead grandfather's body. It wasn't left a long time ago. The blood on the scar was clear evidence that the wound was inflicted at the moment of death. But this guy was strongly denying it. That meant one of two things. Either this guy was lying to deceive him, or... could it be? The focus of Mok Jae-eun's pupils shrank. Eventually, Mok Jae-eun grabbed Jae Chung's collarbone with his fingers and pulled him close. Directly grabbing the bone and pulling, it couldn't be anything but painful. Arg. Regardless, Mok Jae-eun asked. If Ghost Blade is from your organization, you should at least know well whether he killed someone or not, right? At this question, the suffering Jiam Chung shook his head vigorously. I don't know. Shall I make you know? It's true. We are a cell organization to begin with, so we can only move according to the orders given and can't know exactly what each of us is doing. You can't know? Are you certain? Yes. If it's not information we absolutely need to know, it's not even shared. It was too desperate to be a lie. So Mok Jiangan stared at him and said, "Then you must have never heard the name Munno." Munno? Did you just say Munno? Didn't you just say that information isn't shared? At those words, Jiam Chung trembled. Seeing this, Mok Jiangan found it strange and asked, "You know something?" At that question, Jiam Chung hesitated for a moment with a frown before opening his mouth. If the Munno you're talking about is the same name we know, it's the old name of Medicine Immortal He Yang, Immortal. Chapter 260. Clue. Part 2. Medicine Immortal He Yang. Along with crying Dr. Ho Ta, he was known as the greatest physician of the era, and his knowledge of medicine was unrivaled. Medicine Immortal He Yang had saved countless lives with his exceptional medical skills and knowledge of medicine. There was an event that made him renowned throughout the entire Central Plains. It was during the rebellion of the Red Turban Bandits over 30 years ago, which resulted in numerous casualties. As a result, corpses piled up like mountains everywhere and began to rot, causing a terrible plague of unknown origin to spread. This plague quickly spread, engulfing the entire Siam-Xizang region within just half a month, and chaos overflowed in all directions. Fortunately, however, the plague ended without leaving Siam-Xizang. It was because Medicine Immortal He Yang had created a cure for the plague. With this opportunity, Medicine Immortal He Yang, who had been virtually unknown, was able to rise to become the greatest physician of the era alongside crying Dr. Ho Ta. However, despite this fame, not much was known about him. There were few who even knew where he lived or what his real name was. If the Munno you're talking about is the same name we know, it's the old name of Medicine Immortal He Yang. At Jiam Chung's words, Mok Jiangan furrowed his brows. That was because Munno was none other than the name of his grandfather who had raised him. He had asked thinking that this organization might know about him since his grandfather had been killed by Ghost Blade. But he received a completely unexpected answer. What does that mean? It means exactly that. The only Munno we know is the name Medicine Immortal He Yang used in the past. The name Medicine Immortal He Yang used in the past? Are you certain? If it's not a case of people having the same name, the only Munno we know is him. At his words, Mok Jiangan's eyes narrowed. What the hell did this mean? He had come out into the world to find the enemy who killed his grandfather and had learned many things. Among them, naturally, was the fame of Medicine Immortal He Yang. Upon learning of his existence, Mok Jiangan had simply thought that he was a famous physician who knew more about medicinal herbs than his grandfather. In fact, he hadn't paid much attention, thinking it had nothing to do with his revenge. But this was completely unexpected information. My grandfather is Medicine Immortal He Yang? Mok Jiangan's mind became complicated. Although there was a commonality in his knowledge of medicinal herbs and his ability to handle them well, could he really say that Medicine Immortal He Yang was the same person as his grandfather just based on that? So Mok Jiangan pressed his knee against Jiam Chung's chest and said, Munno had been living in seclusion deep in the mountains for over 17 years. How could such a person be Medicine Immortal He Yang? Did you just say 17 years? Yes. It was the time he had lived with his grandfather. However, if it's 17 years, it's even more certain that it's Medicine Immortal He Yang. What? Medicine Immortal He Yang had disappeared and his whereabouts had been unknown since nearly 18 years ago. If the Munno you know had been living in seclusion for that long, it's definitely Medicine Immortal He Yang. Seeing him becoming even more convinced, Mok Jiangan's mind became more twisted. Is my grandfather really Medicine Immortal He Yang? His exceptional knowledge of medicine, to the extent that there was no medicinal herb he didn't know, was thought to be simply because his grandfather was an herbalist who had lived in the mountains for a long time. But now that he thought about it, among those outside, there were few who knew medicinal herbs as well as his grandfather. Sigh. He had only thought about finding his enemy, not about learning more about his grandfather himself. It was also because he had never seen anyone who knew the name Munno. Seeing Mok Jiangun at a loss for words after learning the unknown truth, Jiamcheng inwardly clicked his tongue. Munno. They had long searched for medicine immortal He Yong's whereabouts. But to unexpectedly meet someone who knew medicine immortal He Yong's whereabouts in this situation was truly ironic. What a pity. If it weren't for this situation, it would have been a great achievement. But now, all of this was meaningless. Medicine immortal He Yong. The conversation he had with the Poison King Bek Saha flashed through Mok Jiangun's mind. Then you really don't know who that ghost blade is? That's right. What I learned from fighting him is that he had been severely injured by someone called Medicine Immortal He Yong, known as the greatest herbalist of the era. Is that all you know? At first, I didn't believe it. Until now, no one knew that Medicine Immortal He Yong had learned martial arts. He was an herbalist, after all. Well, he could have hidden it. Yes. That could be the case. But one thing is certain, if Medicine Immortal He Yong is truly the one who severely injured Ghost Blade, his poison arts far surpass mine. Recalling this, Mok Jiangun organized his thoughts step by step. It seemed he really didn't know much about his grandfather until now. And yet, he had stubbornly clung to a single mark, thinking only of revenge, which felt quite foolish. Fame, martial arts. Why had his grandfather hidden all of these things? The grandfather he knew was a person who was detached from such things. But was there a reason he had to hide it even from him? No, it was highly likely that he had hidden all these facts because he knew this would happen. It's strange. But if his grandfather was indeed Medicine Immortal He Yong, there was something that didn't add up. Master Bek Saha clearly said that Ghost Blade was defeated by Medicine Immortal He Yong. That meant his grandfather's martial arts skills were stronger than even one of the 8 stars, known as the best in the current martial arts world. Could such a grandfather be easily killed by Ghost Blade? Of course, this wasn't completely impossible. Because Ghost Blade could have advanced his martial arts by relentlessly training for 17 years, surpassing his grandfather. This is also a possibility. Although he had lived with him for 17 years, he had never seen his grandfather cultivating martial arts. Of course, for a master who had reached a high level, meditation or mental cultivation could be more effective, but he hadn't seen him doing that much either. If one side was training and the other remained the same or regressed, it was possible. However, there was one more thing to confirm here. The fact that he left a scar on my grandfather means it's certain that Ghost Blade and my grandfather fought. But this guy clearly said that Ghost Blade doesn't leave a mark on those he kills. Several speculations became possible from here. One was that this guy was lying, and Ghost Blade killed his grandfather and left the scar. However, there was no point in leaving a mark on a dead person because it would become a trace. So that likely wasn't the case. Another speculation was that his grandfather was old, so he lost his life after exhausting his energy fighting Ghost Blade. But could a master of Ghost Blade's level make such a mistake? This was also somewhat unlikely. Then, a third party appeared and killed my grandfather who had been weakened from fighting Ghost Blade. Clench. Mok Jiangun's fist tightened. It was the most likely possibility. That way, it made sense that the trace left by Ghost Blade remained on his grandfather even in death. Once his mind was organized up to this point, Mok Jiangun stared at Jiamcheng and asked, "What is the relationship between your organization and Munno, no, Medicine Immortal He Yong? What does that? Stop playing dumb. You know Medicine Immortal He Yong's real name, which is not known to the public, and Medicine Immortal He Yong died at the hands of Ghost Blade." What? I said Medicine Immortal He Yong died at the hands of Ghost Blade. That's impossible. What's impossible? Your organization's mark left by Ghost Blade was there. At these words, Jiam Chung frowned and said, "Didn't I tell you? Why would Ghost Blade leave such a mark? Besides, Medicine Immortal He Young is someone the organization must capture alive." Suddenly, Jiam Chung closed his mouth. He had intended to give the information the guy wanted, but to minimize the information related to the organization as much as possible. But he had misspoken. Capture alive. So there was a third party after all. What? Jiam Chung questioned Mok Jiangun's incomprehensible words. What did he mean by there being a third party? To the puzzled Jiam Chung, Mok Jiangun said, "Never mind that. Why are you trying to capture Medicine Immortal He Yang alive?" At that question, Jiam Chung answered immediately without even thinking. "I don't know. There's nothing good about not answering. I really don't know. I was just told that we must secure his whereabouts." "Do you know what?" "What?" Crack. Arg. With the sound of a collarbone breaking, Jiam Chung screamed. No matter which part it was bound to hurt when a bone broke, but he didn't know the collarbone could hurt this much. To the suffering Jiam Chung, Mok Jiangun whispered in his ear, "I can now tell whether you're hiding something or not. I wouldn't want to make you say please kill me 10 times. Uff. No answer. Should I break your left collarbone this time? No, that wouldn't be enough. It would be nice to shatter it into pieces. Let's start with the right side. Stop. That's not the answer I want. Crack. Arg. I heard that Medicine Immortal He Young is hiding something important." In the end, words spilled out of Jiam Chung's mouth. "Something? What is it?" Arg. I really don't know that. I only know that he deceived that person and ran away with it, nothing more." Ran away with it? Was it something important to this organization? But was there anything important that his grandfather could have hidden? He remembered everything that was in the house, but there was nothing particularly important. "Do you really not know?" "It's true. Please believe me." Jiam Chung sincerely pleaded. What's not believable? I feel like I could squeeze it out of you." Mok Jiangun's fingers, which were digging into his flesh, were about to move sideways. Startled by this, Jiam Chung hurriedly said, I'm just a mid-level executive in the 2nd Division. But Ghost Blade, a high-level executive in the 1st Division, might know." 1st Division? For a moment, Jiam Chung's expression stiffened and distorted. Having revealed even the organizational hierarchy, Jiam Chung now truly gave up. Since he had disclosed this much, there was no point in trying to withhold information anymore. To him, Mok Jiangun asked, "Is the 1st Division the highest rank in your organization?" "Yes. The organizational structure goes 1st Division, 2nd Division, 3rd Division, like that, right?" "Yes." "How many divisions are there?" "There are a total of 5 divisions." "Oh ho. If he was a mid-level executive in the 2nd Division out of 5, it was a high position. After all, it was unlikely for someone with this level of martial arts to hold a low position. But if even he had such limited information, this organization was definitely operating as a cell structure. If you're a mid-level executive in the 2nd Division, that's quite high. Is information restricted to that extent? Being a mid-level executive is nothing special." "I see. Then do the high-level executives in the 1st Division know many things?" "They definitely know more than me." "In the end, you're telling me to ask a high-level executive." "Alright. Then where can I meet that high-level executive named Ghost Blade?" "I'd appreciate it if you could tell me his identity." "I really don't know that." "Do you think someone like me in the 2nd Division would know the revealed identity or whereabouts of a high-level executive in the 1st Division?" "I don't understand." "Then who do you report to regarding your missions?" At that question, Jiam Chung was momentarily at a loss for words. It seemed he had asked the right question. No matter how much of a cell structure it was, there had to be someone to report to and a connection to operate. Saying there wasn't any didn't make sense. Tell me. Who do you report to? Is it the one you mentioned earlier as that person? That's absurd. How could someone like me directly report to that person? That person is a noble being that even we in the second division cannot meet. A noble being? Tilting his head, Mok Jayangan asked. What is the identity of that noble being? No. If you don't even know Ghost Blade, who is directly above you, you probably won't know this. Then how do you refer to that being you call that person? You don't just call him that person, right? That's... Jayamchang hesitated for a moment. He had pretty much told this guy everything already. Even if he told him how they referred to that person, it wasn't like this guy could find that person. To the hesitating Jayamchang, Mok Jayangan said, if you're thinking of testing my patience. I was going to tell you. We call that person this. I don't know exactly why we call him that, but the third. Ugh. It was at that very moment. Before he could even finish speaking, the blood vessels in his neck and face swelled up. Realizing something was wrong, Mok Jayangan grabbed his head and face to calm the swollen blood vessels. However, what? He tried to control the energy, but something was strange. It was different from the usual case of energy flowing backward or blood vessels going out of control due to a sudden swelling. This was... Splat. In an instant, Jayamchang's head exploded. There was no time to do anything. As a result, Mok Jayangan's hands, face, and even clothes were covered in blood. Thud. Plop. Mok Jayangan's eyes sharpened as he pushed away the dead Jayamchang's body. The fact that he died while trying to say something meant he had been subjected to a taboo. But this wasn't a taboo caused by martial arts. The unpleasant and ominous energy rising from the corpse of the dead Jayamchang was none other than the curse power containing a cursing technique. The implication of this was simple. A taboo by sorcery. Chapter 261. Clue. Part 3. A taboo by sorcery. Mok Jayangan was convinced as he looked at the corpse of the dead Jayamchang. An unpleasant and ominous curse power was escaping from the body. Sizzle sizzle. Of course, few could see this. Unless they had awakened the ghost eye like Mok Jayangan. This level of curse power is a first. Although weakened and exhausted due to his torture, to be able to imprint a curse in the mind of a master who had crossed the threshold and impose a taboo, the curse power was unimaginable. Diviners were divided into 6 grades: divine, sun, moon, technique, profound, and conveying. Mok Jayangan had experienced in Cook, the primal killing pavilion master, and Zhou Taichung of the 3 Eyes, both of whom had received the highest title of sun-level diviner. Twice, no, 3 times. They also possessed tremendous curse power. But just from the remnant traces, he could estimate that the curse power of the one who had imposed this curse taboo was several times greater. A divine-level diviner? Divine-level diviner. It was a title bestowed upon only 6 among diviners. They were called the 6 divine-level diviners. Those who had received the title of divine-level diviner had reached the pinnacle of sorcery, and there were even stories that their curse power and techniques had reached the realm of half-immortality. Perhaps the one who had placed the curse taboo on the dead Jayamchang was one of the 6 divine-level diviners. A divine-level diviner. If someone who had truly reached the level of a divine-level diviner was closely involved with this organization, it could become even more difficult to carry out his revenge. Mok Jayangan looked at the corpse with an annoyed gaze. As he approached the truth to avenge his grandfather, unexpected obstacles kept emerging. Anyway, although there were many ambiguous parts, he had obtained a lot of information unlike before. The key point remained unchanged: it was Ghost Blade. Even if a third party had killed him instead, according to Jayamchang, he was a high-level executive in the 1st division of the organization with the mark. By contacting him, he could get closer to the real truth about his grandfather's death. Shwip. Mok Jayangan got up and approached someone. It was Associate Military Commissioner Sangik Seo of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, who had fainted after his acupuncture points were struck. Approaching Sangik Seo, Mok Jaehyun. Tap tap tap. Released the acupuncture points he had struck. Soon after, Sangik Seo immediately regained consciousness. Upon regaining consciousness and seeing the Embroidered Uniform Guard 100-man commander Jaim Chung dead with his head exploded, Sangik Seo was inwardly terrified. Eek. From his perspective, having just woken up, it could only be seen as Mok Jaehyun's doing. Feeling his life threatened, Sangik Seo prostrated himself flat in front of Mok Jaehyun. "SP spare my life, ugh." But the moment he prostrated, his abdomen felt extremely painful. Puzzled, he instinctively looked at the painful area. There was a wound on his abdomen, though he didn't know when it had appeared. What is this? If what he knew was correct, the female goo poison command goo was located in that area of his abdomen. But why was there a wound in that spot? Moreover, the wounded area was extremely painful. He felt a searing pain in his organs as if something was tearing them apart, and it was hard to endure even if he tried to forcibly bear it. At that moment, Mok Jaehyun grabbed his hair and lifted his head. Yank. Huh? Seeing Mok Jaehyun's face, or more precisely, the face of Chief Eunuch Ho, the supervisor of the Western Depot, covered in blood as if he had washed it, Sangik Seo couldn't make eye contact due to his bewilderment. Regardless, Mok Jaehyun smiled and said, "I removed the command goo from your abdomen and gave you another gift, but I'm not sure if you'll like it." "And another gift, what do you mean?" "I gave you a poison that could replace it." "Poison?" Hearing those words, Sangik Seo's expression stiffened. "While removing the command goo, the poison penetrated your organs, so by now, it should have spread throughout your entire viscera." Mok Jaehyun grinned and whispered in his ear. "How is it? Does it feel like your stomach is burning?" "Ugh." It was undeniable as the burning pain in his abdomen intensified. "I need to expel the poison quickly." Startled, Sangik Seo tried to gather his true energy to push the poison out of his body. But he couldn't do it. As Mok Jaehyun said, since he had fainted after his acupuncture points were struck, the poison had already spread throughout his entire viscera. Because of that, it was difficult even to gather his true energy. Rather, when he tried to circulate his energy, arg! The pain intensified several times, bringing tears to his eyes. The poison had spread not only to his viscera but also to his blood vessels. Unable to endure this pain, Associate Military Commissioner Sangik Seo pleaded with Mok Jaehyun as if begging, "PL, please spare my life. Please. Spare your life, that depends on how you respond." "What do you mean by how I respond? How did you come to know that person over there?" Mok Jaehyun pointed with his chin to the corpse of Jaim Chung, who had died with his head exploded. At this question, Sangik Seo, with a strong will to live, hastily replied, That person approached us first and offered to help us." "Help with what?" That's. "It seems you don't have much desire to live." "Then I'll just leave you like this." "No, that's not it. He said he would help our faction." "What faction is that?" "The faction led by His Excellency, the Grand Preceptor Hang Yun." Hang Yun? Ah. In the Imperial Palace, there were 4 powerful figures who controlled the country. There was Prince Gyeongjin, the younger brother of His Majesty the Emperor, and Prince Jong, the Emperor's second son who was the most likely candidate for the throne. Then there was Consort Seo, the mother of the current crown prince. Lastly, there was the Grand Preceptor Hang Yun, who held the positions of one of the 3 dukes and the admiral of the Central Military Commission. Associate Military Commissioner Sangik Seo of the Embroidered Uniform Guard belonged to this Hang Yun. Interesting. What is? It's full of people from the 4 factions, all entangled and intertwined, desperate to devour each other. Not a single person is loyal to the emperor who actually rules the country. At those words, Sangik Seo's expression subtly distorted. Was it because he felt a bit of shame? Of course not. If he had felt ashamed by such words, he wouldn't have joined with Hang Yun in the first place. Instead of an old and sickly emperor who indulges in women, if you don't belong to one of the four factions, you can't survive in the palace. What do you expect me to do? That was Sangakessio's true thoughts. However, in a situation where he could die from the poison in his stomach, he couldn't reveal his true feelings. Sangakessio, not caring about being servile, cowed out on the floor and pleaded with Mok Jayangun. Please spare my life. I'll do anything. He believed that being alive, even in a pile of dog sh*t, was definitely better than being dead. So he didn't care about his pride. Seeing him like this, Mok Jayangun snorted and said, he wouldn't have approached you to help without any compensation, so what condition did he offer? It won't do you any good to delay like that. If the poison spreads further, it'll be useless even if you want to live. He asked us to find and capture the remnants of the Fire Faith Order and give him the right to dispose of them. Mok Jayangun's eyes flickered with surprise at his urgent words. The right to dispose of the Fire Faith Order believers? He had only focused on his grandfather and hadn't shown interest in what they were doing. But suddenly being told that they had asked for the right to dispose of the Fire Faith Order believers raised questions. Why the Fire Faith Order? Did their organization have a grudge against the Fire Faith Order? Otherwise, there would be no reason to mobilize the military power of the Imperial Palace, which encompassed the entire Central Plains, to capture the Fire Faith Order believers. No, in the first place, the Fire Faith Order was not only rejected by the Imperial Palace but also by the Taoist and Buddhist sects, and even the martial artists had contributed to their persecution. So Mok Jayangun changed his thinking. The right to dispose doesn't necessarily mean to eliminate them. It could be because they had some close connection with them or wanted something from them. So Mok Jayangun asked him, if you received the right to dispose, what did you do with them? Did you kill them? We used various methods to get them out of the prison and take them away. Take them away? Yes. The speculation from his changed thinking was correct. Judging by the fact that they didn't kill them but took them away, it was certain that the organization with the mark had some connection or purpose with the Fire Faith Order, as expected. Huh? But if they used various methods to take out the Fire Faith Order believers, did that mean there was a natural way to get them out of the underground prison? That's good. Then you can get someone out of the prison anytime, right? It's not that easy to take them out as I please. It requires some prior arrangements, and even if it's a regular prison, once they're imprisoned in the underground prison, they can't be taken out. At these words, Mok Jayangun clicked his tongue as if disappointed. If it had been possible, he had intended to use this person to get them out without needing to go in himself, but it seemed difficult. However, since this person was an associate military commissioner, wouldn't he have the necessary authority? He had to successfully complete the secret mission given by the society leader to steal the Holy Fire Spirit Orb in order to contact him and obtain clues about Ghost Blade. But since the embroidered uniform guard manages the underground prison, wouldn't it be possible if we devise a way? The prisoners confined in the underground prison are special management targets of high treason, so unless the Emperor, the three dukes, the Minister of Justice, and others all give their approval, it is impossible to release or pardon them. What were the chances of the Emperor, the three dukes, the officials in charge of executing and managing criminal law, and all of them reaching a consensus? It was no exaggeration to say that once imprisoned in the underground prison, one could never come out until their sentence was completed or until death. As expected of the Imperial Palace, the procedures were not only complicated but also convoluted. No choice. In the end, to steal the Holy Fire Spirit Orb of the Fire Faith Order, it seemed he had no choice but to directly enter the underground prison. It was the same for the organization with the mark. At that moment, Mok Jayangun's eyes narrowed. Ah. Come to think of it, the one who had ordered him to steal the Holy Fire Spirit Orb of the Fire Faith Order imprisoned in the Imperial Palace's underground prison was the Heaven and Earth Society leader. But Ghost Blade definitely had some connection with the sect leader. Recalling this, Mok Jayangun suddenly came up with a speculation. Could it be that the Heaven and Earth Society leader is also closely connected to or even a member of this organization? Otherwise, it would be too much of a coincidence. The underground prison had complicated procedures, so even a high-ranking associate military commissioner of the embroidered uniform guard couldn't get someone out in any way. But they were dispatched to risk danger and steal the holy fire spirit orb from such a place. It fit together almost too perfectly. Mok Jae-un stared intently at Associate Military Commissioner Sang-ik Seo, who was prostrating and observing his reaction. There was a way to check how accurate his speculation was. So Mok Jae-un asked him, "Then has that organization given up on getting the Fire Faith Order believer imprisoned in the underground prison out?" At that question, Associate Military Commissioner Sang-ik Seo furrowed his brows. "How did you know there's a Fire Faith Order believer in the underground prison? Just answer the question." "I'm not sure if they've given up." "Your answer is ambiguous." "I am not trying to deceive you. That person seems to have tried to go in and attempted a few times himself, but since the believer is imprisoned in the Eternal Hell Prison, I think he has given up on getting them out." "Eternal Hell Prison? What's that?" he asked because it was the first time he had heard of it. The Eternal Hell Prison is the prison located on the lowest level of the underground prison. The lowest level? Yes. It's where they confine the prisoners deemed the worst of the worst. Worst of the worst, if they used the term eternal, the security must be extremely tight to make it absolutely impossible to escape. There was actually one person who escaped from there since the underground prison was built. So I heard that the Eternal Hell Prison was created as a reinforced version based on that incident. Since it was built, no one imprisoned there has ever escaped. If the security is tight enough that even a master who has crossed the threshold can't easily get someone out, how stringent is it? It seemed it would be even more difficult than entering the prison. Clicking his tongue inwardly, Mok Jae-un changed his question. "If they've given up, I guess they just left that Fire Faith Order believer alone until they could find a way." No, that's not the case. Rather than getting them out, Jae Chung seemed to be trying to find out something from the Fire Faith Order believer through interrogation, as if it was urgent for some reason. Trying to find out something? Yes. What is it? In fact, Sang-ik Seo shouldn't have been able to answer this question. However, although they had joined hands out of mutual necessity, he also couldn't fully trust Jae Chung, so he had been secretly monitoring him. But since he was such an exceptional master, he couldn't find out much, and he had only learned the name of what he was trying to find out from that Fire Faith Order believer imprisoned in the underground prison. "I'm not sure exactly what it's used for, but it seemed like he was trying to find out where something called the treasure orb is." Treasure orb? You don't know what that is? I don't know exactly. But there is one thing I speculate. Speculation? Yes. I think it might be related to the serious reason why that Fire Faith Order believer was the only one imprisoned in the Eternal Hell Prison, unlike the other believers. Serious reason? Was it because the Holy Fire Spiritual Master held a high position and was an important item for the Fire Faith Order? Or was there another reason? What is it? Puzzled, Sang-ik Seo said in a meaningful voice. "I heard that Fire Faith Order believer could foresee the future by receiving revelations from something called the Holy Fire or something." Chapter 262. Clue. Part 4. I heard that Fire Faith Order believer could foresee the future by receiving revelations from something called the Holy Fire or something. At those words, Mok Jae-un raised one eyebrow and tilted his head. Foresee the future? In response to Mok Jae-un's question, Associate Military Commissioner Sang-ik Seo replied, "Yes. I don't know if it's true or not, but there was quite a lot of talk about it among the higher-ups, enough to make a fuss." Foresee. Foresee the future. Was such a thing really possible? Beyond being interesting or fascinating, Mok Jae-un believed it was completely impossible. In the first place, if it was truly possible, there was no way the Fire Faith Order believers couldn't have prevented being persecuted and ending up like this. However, if we assume it's possible, it would be an ability that everyone would covet. Being able to know what would happen in the future was a tremendous ability. It meant having the advantage of being able to prepare for future events. It's becoming confusing. It became ambiguous whether the society leader was targeting the Holy Fire Spirit Orb because he was in league with the organization with the mark, or because of this foresight ability. Because if it was the foresight ability, it would be a rare ability that anyone would covet. However, there was something to point out here. But didn't you just say that this person could foresee the future? Yes. That sounds as if that believer can't foresee it now. At Mok Jayangun's words, Sangik Seo inwardly clicked his tongue. He didn't miss even the smallest detail. Am I wrong? You're right. I don't know if that believer was able to do it before and lost the ability, or if the believer couldn't do it from the beginning and was just lying, but currently, that person can't foresee the future. How do you know that? At first, we thought the believer might be deceiving us with lies, so we tested them several times. For example, we presented a cup with poison and one without and had the believer distinguish between them, and even with tests that could endanger their life, the believer really couldn't foresee anything. It turned out to be a meaningless act. Yes. However, thanks to that, the higher-ups who had judged that the Fire Faith Order believer had nothing special lost interest. No, it almost disappeared. But keeping that person imprisoned is just in case? I think that's probably the case. If, by a slim chance, they find that treasure orb that the Fire Faith Order believer is desperately trying to hide, it might become possible to foresee. Ugh. At that moment, Associate Military Commissioner Sang Ikesio stopped mid-sentence, clutched his abdomen, and groaned. His face was pale and had a purplish tint, indicating his condition was not good. It was a symptom of the poison spreading beyond his viscera to his entire body. It seemed he couldn't endure it any longer. Ugh. Perhaps due to that influence. Associate Military Commissioner Sang Ikesio vomited black blood along with his retching. A foul smell rose from the black blood that fell to the floor. I'm going to die, PL please save, Sang Ikesio, who had vomited blood, looked at Mok Jayangun with pleading eyes while crawling on the floor. Mok Jayangun, who was looking down at him with a dry gaze, shook his head and then made a cut on his finger, opening Sang Ikesio's jaw. Eat it. Drip drip. Mok Jayangun's blood entered Sang Ikesio's mouth. Although he was puzzled by suddenly being told to drink blood, Sang Ikesio, with a strong desire to live, swallowed it down his throat as instructed. Then, the pain that felt like it was burning his viscera and his entire body began to subside. Huh? You'll be fine for a while. For a while? If you don't do this periodically, you'll have seizures like now and your breath will stop. Strictly speaking, this wasn't detoxification. It was the principle of suppressing poison with poison based on the principle of fighting poison with poison. At Mok Jayangun's words, Associate Military Commissioner Sang Ikesio's expression stiffened. Weren't you going to detoxify me? I never said that. What do you mean? Squeeze. Ugh. Mok Jayangun grabbed Associate Military Commissioner Sang Ikesio's cheeks with his hand and smiled, saying, "There's a strict difference between saying I'll save your life and that. This. Did he never intend to detoxify him from the beginning?" Mok Jayangun whispered in the ear of the bewildered Sang Ikesio, who realized he had been deceived. Since you've tried controlling someone with poison, being controlled in reverse wouldn't be so bad. At those words, 1,000-men Commander Ma Arehayan of the embroidered uniform guard flashed through Sang Ikesio's mind. Sang Ikesio had used Ma Arehayan with the goo poison. But now, he was about to be controlled by this person, addicted to the poison. This was literally the consequence of one's actions. Mok Jayangun, who was moving secretly after finishing his business, was lost in thought. Although he had obtained much more information than before, many things were still ambiguous. Especially since many parts he didn't know about his grandfather's death had been revealed, he was becoming more and more curious. What kind of relationship did my grandfather have with them? Why had the organization with the mark targeted his grandfather? And who had really killed his grandfather? The key figure who could solve all these questions was none other than Ghost Blade. Ghost Blade. Coincidentally, everything was leading to him. To contact him, the urgent task was to contact the society leader. Another coincidence here was the Holy Fire Spirit Orb. That was because, like his grandfather, the organization with the mark was targeting this Holy Fire Spirit Orb. No, to be precise, they seemed to want the Holy Fire Spirit Orb's ability. Foresight ability. He still didn't believe it, but if it was possible, it would be a rare ability that everyone would target, not just the organization with the mark. The Holy Fire Spirit Orb, who possessed this ability, could also be a clue to solving part of the mystery. At least, regardless of the truth of that ability, the person himself would clearly know why the organization with the mark was targeting him. If we find out that reason, it will be useful. The sect leader, the organization with the mark, the Fire Faith Order. All of them were targeting the Holy Fire Spirit Orb. If he secured this person's whereabouts before them, he could use it as leverage to obtain everything he wanted. He would also be able to find out their hidden relationship. Embroidered Uniform Guard 6th Office of Selection. The masked embroidered uniform guard 1,000-man commander Ma-Are Hyan was pacing back and forth in the office with an anxious gaze. What the hell was that Mok Jiangun doing? He had gone saying he would talk, but what he was doing was questionable. Should I have followed him? If things went wrong, it was he who would lose his life due to the goo poison. He didn't know that entrusting his life to someone else would make him so anxious. But if he thought about it, if he had moved with Mok Jiangun and got caught, it might have backfired and he would have been caught instead. Either way, there was nothing he could do. As Ma-Are Hyan was anxiously circling around the guest table, his eyes with the walleye technique trembled. Throb. A sudden intense pain felt in his abdomen. This wasn't just a simple pain. Startled by the intense pain as if something was gnawing at his abdomen, Ma-Are Hyan clutched his stomach and knelt on one knee. Thud. Ugh. Along with the pain transmitted to his danjian, he even felt his intestines twisting. Ma-Are Hyan instinctively believed that this was due to the goo poison. Did something go wrong? Otherwise, there was no way he would feel this kind of pain. Had trusting that Mok Jiangun become a mistake? Ma-Are Hyan gritted his teeth. If that guy had failed and Associate Military Commissioner Sangik Seo had triggered the goo poison, he was as good as dead. If he was going to die anyway, he had to do everything he could. The pain was so severe that he wanted to curl up and roll around while clutching his stomach, but Ma-Are Hyan endured it with superhuman patience and sat cross-legged. Let's try to expel the goo poison with true energy. That was the only thing he could do right now. Fortunately, unlike the threat he had heard from Associate Military Commissioner Sangik Seo, the goo poison was rampaging without touching his danjian, so it seemed he could draw out his true energy. Phew. Ma-Are Hyan drew out his true energy and sent it to where the goo poison was rampaging. He moved his energy as delicately as possible to control the goo poison, but... Throb. The moment he sent his energy near it, the goo poison became even more violent and injured his internal organs. It would be painful enough to just be injured, but the goo poison was literally a poison. The moment the goo poison bit, a deadly poison spread to his organs. Uff. Ma-Are Hyan, who had tried to endure it with superhuman patience, eventually broke his cross-legged position and writhed in pain. He was in no condition to move delicately, let alone use true energy. Clatter. In the midst of that, his mask fell off, but Ma-Are Hyan was in too much pain to even be aware of it. His eyes with the walleye technique rolled back, and he convulsed all over his body. Purple blood vessels were rising on his face, and his condition was rapidly deteriorating. Is this how I die? Ma-Are Hyan, whose consciousness was gradually fading, sensed his own death. As the final moment approached, everything flashed before his eyes like a montage. Your father came from a very far place in the west with a mission. Don't resent him too much. The last words his mother had said about that damned man before her passing also came to mind. Why was this suddenly coming to mind? Thinking that he would die without having accomplished anything, everything felt futile. The only consolation was that he hadn't caused trouble for his mentor, Soyerin, the 1,000-man commander. With the evidence like this, she, being clever, would be able to catch Associate Military Commissioner saying "Ikesio." Ugh. His consciousness was gradually fading away. It was at that moment. Shwip. Someone placed their hands on Ma Arehyon's abdomen and the Baihui acupoint on the top of his head. Then something surged into his body. Ma Arehyon's eyes, which had been closing, opened wide. Ma Arehyon's eyes trembled. The energy surging into his body was different from the internal energy that exhibited the usual nourishing energy. This wasn't the true energy he knew. It was like an endless darkness entering, reminiscent of an abyss. And within that darkness, whoosh! There was something brutal to the point of despair. What the hell is this? Ma Arehyan was gripped by a strange feeling at this unknown brutal energy he had never experienced before. He should have rejected this dangerous energy, but instead, he gradually became accustomed to it along with a thrill. No, it was more accurate to say that he was being rapidly eroded. Sizzle. At some point, black haze began to flow out from Ma Arehyan's entire body. It was none other than demonic energy.